This is Ethics Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. Welcome everybody to the last session of the third day of the BioCeuticals 6th Research Symposium. And I'm here with Professor Terry Wahls. She's very humble. She only says Dr. Terry Wahls. She's Professor Terry Wahls.
Oh, that's true.
Now, we've learned a heck of a lot. I'm going to go a little bit backwards and start at the beginning. With the personalised lifestyle program, you prioritise sleep and relaxation. But importantly include resilience. And this is something that really interests me.
Yes.
Could you take us through why you chose to prioritise the things that way? And does teaching resilience improve both compliance, empowerment, and the sick patient syndrome as well?
I think resilience is critical. People have to have a purpose for taking on these new health behaviors. So I'm asking them to give up the foods they love, give up many aspects of their behaviors, and to sustain that, they need to have this connected to their inner purpose, their mission in life. I find it very useful to walk people through the pleasant life, good life, meaningful life, so they are more inspired to be willing to do the work. Because this is a lot of work.
Heck of a lot of work.
Getting people to give up tobacco addiction, alcohol addiction, marijuana, all these drugs of abuse. We understand that's very difficult. What we often forget is the health behaviors we're asking them to adapt is just as hard as the changes we're asking our people who have substance abuse problems. So I think it's critical.
Do you find then that they tend to swap one addiction for another?
Very
like for
commonly.
Instance,
Very commonly,
yeah.
people with substance abuse will swap things out for sugar
Yep.
or a religious extremism point of view. So that is a very, very common. If you can get them to tune in to life's purpose, meanings, then you are less likely to swap out harmful addictions.
Can you comment on trials with vitamin D in MS with regards to dose, timing, progression?
Well, actually, I went through that this morning,
Yep.
so I'm going to refer people back to that. Most of the studies, early studies, used very low dose, 400, 800 international units, did not monitor levels. And now as I look at more recent studies where we are monitoring levels or high doses, and then looking at cytokine effects, but we don't have long-term clinical outcomes data. I think the full question's not really answered yet. For all of us in practice, what I do is monitor levels, use vitamin K2, and know that there's going to be a lot of variability in dosing. Another part of that equation has to do with the vitamin D receptors and the SNPs there. So there may be a reason to think about monitoring your vitamin D receptor SNPs.
There was it a group in Brazil that was using ultra-high dose vitamin D? Is that right?
Very high, 20,000 units. He's had great success. But I look in his papers, we don't see him reporting out vitamin D levels. We're talking much about vitamin K2. If you do very high dose vitamin D and you make people vitamin D toxic, that becomes a problem. When you use high dose vitamin D, or even when we drive up vitamin D levels and increase calcium absorption, we're going to make for kidney stones, ectopic calcifications. So you can use whatever vitamin D level you want, but monitor the level and treat to the level as opposed to the dose.
ApoE. Genetic testing.
Yes, ApoE. So
I don't get this.
So ApoE, we had the original mutation about 200,000 years ago, and that's when we developed our big brain. So ApoE4 is probably critical for a lot of favorable things in our brain. Then we had the ApoE3. ApoE4 was 6 million years ago. ApoE3, 200,000 years ago. ApoE2 about 20,000 years ago. And this is a fat transporter. Now, the question is, if you have ApoE4, we have a marked increased risk for neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's. ApoE3 is average risk, ApoE2 protective. I have a big following in the APOE4 community who tell me that by following my protocol, they've had improved cognitive performance. Right. But they really didn't want to use the coconut oil. They're very afraid of saturated fat. So what they've done, and they've taught me this has worked out very well for them, is they eat once a day or every other day, use lots of olive oil. They still get into ketosis. And they're having decrease in inflammatory profiles, great cognitive performance. I've met some APOE4 homozygous folks in their 90s who are still living independently, driving independently, and winning at crossword puzzle championships.
Right.
So clearly doing well.
Yeah. Different types of exercise, different range of motions, dancing versus the linear type of exercise that you see. Do you find different effects with different styles of movement rather than this rigid sort of
what I think is most important is that people enjoy it.
Yeah.
And they want to do it, and they keep doing it every day. And so I think it needs to be something you enjoy. Contralateral movement is really helpful. Movement that is not planned, where you have to respond to the environment is helpful. Yeah. Strength training is helpful. Balance training is helpful. Fast twitch. So if you're strong enough to do some explosive movements, jumps, leaps, that's very helpful. It depends on where you are coming from. If I think back to where I was coming from, just reaching up and touching my knees and doing very basic exercises for 10 minutes. If I did 12 minutes, I was exhausted. I couldn't possibly function for the rest of the day. So you really have to personalize this to where your patient is at. If you overtrain them, they lose ground. So this really needs to be personalized.
Yeah. Question from Sally. Can you comment about the two faces of Akkermansia muscinophilia? Is it a pathobiont in that, in one instance it could be good, another instance it can be a...
If we look at our hunter-gatherer microbiome data, they have a lot of microbes that we consider to be quite pathogenic, that if they showed up in your microbiome, you'd be really ill and I'd be treating you. It is the community. It is not the individual. So I really take a great exception to all these papers I see talking about individual microbes. It is the community. It's how I am getting all the metabolic work done. And so I may have solved that with one species, because I live in North America. You're going to solve it with different species if you live in Japan or China or Africa or Australia. It is the community, it's not the microbe. And it's whether or not the metabolic processes are being accomplished. So really the best studies are looking at the species and the metabolome, because it's the metabolome that is really influencing my health, not the species, not the census takers. That's old research that's going to be left in the dust.
So this is why, like a probiotic supplement might be good for a remedy sort of thing, but it's really the diet that we have to work with.
It is the diet, it is the fiber, it is the diversity, and having the metabolic, the metabolome. It's not the census. It's the metabolome that's going to determine our health.
So with regards to that, looking at choline, there was some concern about TMAO, the trimethyl oxide, that's converted in the liver. And
So yes, we do have to worry about that. But the real question is, what is the metabolome and what... I really have a hard time thinking that meat is a problem because we've been eating it for about 6 million years. So the problem is probably the microbes that we have shifted in the last 300 years with all that sugar and white flour.
Yeah.
So again, I worry much less about the species and far more about the metabolome. It's very different, the census of who's there versus how we're getting the metabolic work done. And that's where the microbiology research is happening right now, is the metabolome.
Yeah. This seems very akin to Martin Blazer's work about missing microbes. So we're blaming all of these other things. It's the microbes that we've killed and decimated, and we need to get them back. Is that right?
Right. Well, we need the metabolic function back. But we have to remember this. In order to fulfill those metabolic steps, there are many different species that can do that across many different phyla. And so having the perfect mix that fills in those 5 million genes that I need will be solved in a wide variety of ways, which is why you and I have a unique fingerprint for our microbiome. I really think the species kind was very helpful for our initial understanding. But the metabolome is how we actually get that biochemistry to happen. That's a more complex question that we're finally beginning to look at.
Question from Dan before we throw to the audience, and that is, I think what he was asking was, what about long-term expectations he was asking particularly with your MS, have you had long-term success enough to stay off all meds?
So my journey, 7 years of disease-modifying therapy, I started tinkering with my healthcare in 2002, and refined it in 2007, had these dramatic results. Within 6 months, I was back with my neurologist's office saying, I want to go off disease-modifying therapy. He said, well, okay, let's do that. Over the next 2 weeks, we tapered things off. So I've been off disease-modifying therapy since 2008. If I accidentally got fed gluten, I would have a horrific flare of my face pain that would be incapacitating, and I would require high-dose steroids to get past that. Yeah. But I've been on no disease-modifying therapies for that duration.
Quite amazing. And one last question from me, which you and I spoke about during our podcast, and that is just, I am in total reverence of your reverence to your partner. And we spoke briefly about just how important it was to have a supportive partner through your process and through your patient's process. So how do you engender that? How do you encourage that when you get all sorts of, obviously, relationship dynamics happening, fear, loathing in Las Vegas and everything? So how do you actually bring the partner along for the ride to encourage them to be supportive of the patient with the
I think talk therapy sometimes is really critical, and I'm open to acknowledging that having a supportive partner who helps you with your health behavior choices, and if your partner is promoting health-destroying choices, that's not going to work out, and I encourage them to have family therapy. And sometimes they work it out, and sometimes the individuals realize this is not a partnership that's working, and the relationship dissolves. But that's the fundamental look, is your partner helping you nourish health-promoting choices or encouraging health-destroying choices, in which case family therapy is needed, and some sort of resolution is in everyone's best interest.
Can I just give you my personal thank you for the lessons taught to me about not just resilience, but choosing how you're going to react and what's your responsibility to bring something to the world. So thank you from me as well. I would imagine most people here.
This is a big insight I've learned now over the last several years is, I can't control what happens to me. I can't control what my kids do, what my partner does, what my crazy president does, all the world around me.
Your crazy president?
But the one thing I can control is my attitude, my choice, my perspective, my self-talk. And that is the most powerful choice that I have of all.
Well done, well said. And with that, I will throw to the audience for any questions that people might have. One over here.
I want to ask a question about a condition which is not as widely discussed in this forum. And a lot of cardiologists believe atrial fibrillation is a symptom, not a disease, and it is autoimmune related. If I may ask, in your clinic, would you have data about how well or how much needle has been moved in terms of people with atrial fibrillation who come to your clinic?
Okay, so we'll talk about heart disease in general. I've had folks come with me with fairly advanced heart failure, and we've had improved cardiac function, improved quality of life using, basically my level 1, level 2 of my diet. We've had people with atherosclerosis, angina, experience improvement in lipid profiles, improved exercise tolerance. Atrial fibrillation, I've not had enough experience to have a strong opinion. I do have one patient who was on a low saturated fat diet, very, very low fat diet for breast cancer, and had done very well. Came to see me, and we began to put her on a level 1 diet, and she had an increase in her atrial fibrillation. And so I had her go back on a vegetarian vegan diet, asked her to do a reduced lectin version by soaking her grain-free legumes, her gluten-free grains and legumes, and is doing well with that. I would make the observation that I would want to be sure that with that AFib that you've checked the vitamin D and have optimized vitamin D and vitamin K2.
Yes, my daughter-in-law, she has MS and she's about 45. She refuses to consistently cut out anything that has anything to do with diet. She's on the highest amount of painkillers, and she then believes that her neurologist knows whatever is best for her, and now she's on the highest degree, so that's it. She gets episodes and regressions. What could you do? I mean, obviously I have said whatever I say, but she finds me a bit opinionated.
Yeah.
And that is probably true. However, it doesn't help for her to...
You have to let it go.
Yeah, but
It's
what
her
can
life.
she do? Okay,
She will make her choices. You can be an example. You let her know that she can come to you for questions. You have to let it go and just maintain the family relationship. Incredibly difficult. I have my own variations of that with my family,
No
with some
doubt.
health challenges. And it requires a lot of prayer and meditation on my part to be willing to let go. Because I care deeply about some of these people who are making choices that I know could be better managed in a variety of other integrative ways, and they're not ready to hear that.
I think there is a German therapy that's coming out, and that's expensive or whatever.
There are many options for this woman, but she's the one who has to make the choice.
I think so. They're waiting for those kind of therapies to come along, but will they ever work if you don't do the rest?
She will have to make the choice. And you can be a resource, but I think you may have to do some prayer and meditation.
Yeah, okay.
It's very difficult. It is very difficult. I have a similar prayer and meditation struggle myself with people that I care very deeply about that could be having far better management of their very serious health challenges, but they are pre-contemplated.
That's a hard one to let go on. A last question.
Oh my
That's
God,
pretty
it
deep.
is very hard. I'm praying about that daily.
But with that, I would like to deeply thank you so much for joining us at the 6th Symposium. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
joining us. You can find all the videos from the FX Medicine Live stage at the 6th BioCeuticals Research Symposium in Melbourne by going to the FX Medicine website and clicking on Industry Insights under the Community tab.